So, hi, welcome to One Grey Dot. My name is Andy Gray. I am the owner of One Grey Dot company, and I'm helping authors to be able to tell their story and even creating a course. Stay tuned, make sure you like and subscribe to be able to be kept up to date with that. Now, this is all about speed painting. Speed painting is kind of like doing things really fast. Painting fast. Not things generally, but painting quickly, because painting takes some time to do, and normally we talk about somewhere between I don't know 20 and 50 hours to just do one illustration. But there is a world out there which is called speed painting, and the concept behind speed painting is that you do it very, very quickly, and it's great to keep you fluid and enjoying things. Now, I used speed painting in quite a lot of my illustrations years ago, not so much now, so I'm a little bit rusty. But I wanted to see, could you do speed painting in Rebelle 3? Alright, so we've got Photoshop, which is great, but could you do it in Rebelle 3? So, the way that we normally do speed painting is that we take various shapes and forms and put them over one another and use textures and things to be able to help us to understand the concept piece. And it's usually used in concept work because of how fast you can manage to create a piece to be able to put in front of your bosses. So maybe we'll be doing 2 or 3 a day. Now, thing is, Photoshop has lots of lovely things about it. You can warp shapes, you can bring in photos, you can warp them, and you can really enjoy it. But you can't do that in Rebelle. You can bring pictures in and you can rub bits out and you can change how big they are, but you cannot warp them. It's not photo manipulation software. However, it does have going for it lots of lovely things like textures of paper that you can use, and you can still use masks. In fact, actually the masking system in Rebelle 3 is second to none, because you can paint in a mask in black and then you can use it for watercolor flow and do all sorts of exciting things like that. The acrylic system in there I really like. The closest to it is I found is Corel Painter, and Corel Painter I still fight with sometimes. I was finding the blending system together with the texture system was absolutely beautiful in rendering this image out. But there were some problems. I will come on to that. I'll give you a summary at the end as to whether or not I think Rebelle 3 is the right kind of software to use if you want to do speed painting or not. Okay, let's get on with the video. So we're starting off with just a load of random scribbles. I'm using the acrylic paintbrush for this, and it's basically to create the black lines and shapes and formats. So first time I've used Rebelle 3 for creating a speed paint, but this is basically how you do it. Lots of black scribbles. You do this in Photoshop anyway. Difference with Rebelle 3 is I discovered that if you use the Marquee Tool, that is the little walking ants thing, and you select around a shape, and then you press the selection tool, which is kind of like that little X shape up the top there, top right, and then when you click enter, it actually automatically defaults it and puts it on a brand new layer of its own. That's a nice nifty little thing. So you're going to see a couple of these shapes appear at the end in some of the designs. So basically what you do with those multiple shapes, whether using Photoshop or Rebelle 3 or whatever, is to create shapes and then put the shapes overlapping each other and see what they might suggest. So they made a couple of those made their way to the final image. So I had no idea really what I wanted to do. I hadn't got anything planned out, so I just basically bunged stuff down on the acrylics and started messing around, and I thought, well, maybe a desert would be good, so maybe a sunset, maybe something like that. Okay, again using the Marquee Tool, and this time I'm using a pastel over the top. Just dropping things in so you can use it as basically a masking layer. So I'm just trying to mess around with some ideas more than anything else. So it's quite the blending tool is quite nice on this, so I do like it. Oh, I put some water in here, so this is watercolor. It's just swishing its way down. You can see this is in fast motion, but I think it's ramped to about 9,000% or something. But it does do some beautiful effects. So that was watercolor. Got some more watercolor going on here. Got it running down, creating drips. and all sorts of things. I'm just trying to create textures to break it all up. So I took those textures and I rubbed out some lines and rotated them and dropped them on top of each other, and just trying to basically feel some sort of design going on. I really should have read a book first and got an idea of what I want to do. Anyway, wasn't too sure, so this is how you work sometimes. At this point I'd actually seen some shapes I quite liked, so I went in with the pen marked with white, so I used a white pen, ink kind of style, and sketched out some ideas. So these ideas will make it to the final cut, and again just use the Marquee Tool to block out some shapes for myself, and then using the pastel to go in there. So it's no different really than using some sort of stencil. In the end, as you'll come and see, I wasn't very happy with my efforts of actually painting this. It probably looked better at this point in time. I think I overworked it, to be perfectly honest with you. So I had to bring in some textures, but that was alright. Here's me trying to scream. Now this is what else I'll come to later in my summary. I couldn't manage for the life of me to distort that shadow. I wanted to do it really easily, because in Photoshop you just distort the shadow. Couldn't do it, so I had to paint the shadow in by hand, which isn't a bad thing, but it annoyed me a little bit. Wasn't as nice to work with as it normally is. So I wanted some sort of spacey kind of theme going on, so I reckon this looked like some sort of spaceship. I just set it to transparency lock and then started putting things over each other, and actually that same spaceship ended up with a little bit of a tweak being used as part of the city. So I don't know why I did that, it just looked like fun, and then I didn't like it that way up either, so I turned the spaceship around, as you'll see, but that's okay, these are all fun things to do. So this city, I wasn't really too sure, and in the end I feel as though I put too many focus points in the main picture, so that was a bit annoying, but there you go. Right, so I've started working on this spaceship in the air, just kind of like dropping some highlights in, because this is a good way of working. Actually, in the illustration course I go into this, how I use this idea of concept artwork and working a lot with silhouettes and forms as the main way of drawing. So a lot of the time people use lines to depict the border, if you like, between one shape and another, but it's a lot easier to start off with solid shapes, and you can even use pencil and paper. Watch, this is the spaceship that's going to happen down below, and I just started it with a large mass and then painted in the highlights over the top, and then slowly added more and more details. This is a rock in the corner. I'm trying to get some sort of twisted rock thing going, and it wasn't happening until the end. Banged my head against a big wall with this one. It's my own fault, I didn't look up any reference too soon, but you'll see me messing. What it does show though is it shows how beautifully the acrylic brush works. I found that the best thing is not to have it fully loaded with paint, but about half loaded, and then you can press on with your stylus. I'm using Cintiq, but you can press on with your stylus to be able to get the paint down, and then just by going lightly the paint runs out, and then you can blend it rather nicely. So according to my timings, I'm about halfway done now. Oh, this is where I kept making a mistake on. I kept using the jolly watercolor on a layer, which is like, no, I didn't want to use watercolor on this, and so I forced myself to stick with it. Now, so we're getting some sort of curly kind of something going on. I'm not quite sure what I was doing, and the spaceship at this point was looking more like a whale than anything else. I was trying to get it so there was a hatch down the front there, but it looked like a whale. And I couldn't manage to get the textures the way I wanted either. So again, the thing about Photoshop is it's got so many textures available in forms of chalk and everything else, and it works like a stamp, but you're going to get most of your textures from the paper base. For doing illustrations, it's brilliant as Rebelle 3 for the paper textures that you can work with, but when you're working in Photoshop, so when you're trying to do concept art like this, it becomes very difficult. So I did get quite frustrated on the way through, but never mind, we keep working. This that black thing that I just dropped in there, that was a part of those initial black objects I worked with earlier on, and I just taken a slither and used that for some kind of some decal kind of stuff in the end down the edges. Don't think much of that survived really. There are stencils as well. You can see me working with some stencils here in Rebelle 3. They're quite nice. I could probably make my own stencils, to be honest, but I was just again trying to work out, could you really use stencils quite nicely? And I think you probably could, but in this particular image it wasn't working for me, so I kept going and then just kind of dropped them. So here I am, I'm working up the design on the lower spaceship, the kind of like this crash spaceship, to see what I could do with it, and building up more and more ideas of what I was wanting. And then I decided, well, let's put a little bit of spray paint in there and try some of that out. So the top spaceship I'm actually quite enjoying. I quite like the way that one came out, the top right spaceship coming in. Then it all started going a bit strange. Right, so I found online, I looked for some stock imagery that could be remixed or reused, and this is me trying desperately to work out how to manipulate the photo over the top to be able to get it to slant the right direction. See, the main thing that I was struggling with is that whenever, it was great, I could put it on multiply level, I suppose I could have changed the opacity, but whenever I was moving the picture around, it went back to this solid picture, so it became very difficult to move around. So in the end I decided, let's take the photograph and take the bits out that I wanted and do a bit of photo bashing that way. So apart from fighting with the layers and trying to work out what layer I was on, I did start to be able to get somewhere. So this is what you do. With concept art, when you're working, you will take photos from different places. So that was just an industrial picture, and you'll start photo bashing, which means that you take bits from other pictures and start putting them together on your original image to help you to concept the piece, to help work out what you're trying to do. Now I had the idea that I wanted to put some kind of like plating onto this spaceship, so I found a tank, and I'm now here flipping and just sticking tank bits all over my spaceship to see what I can come up with, and that actually stayed to the very end, so I was actually rather pleased with the effect of that one. So this is another trick that you use in composition and creating these images. You basically just kind of like put the photos over the top, and you change the lighting styles, and then you put more textures over it and change those lighting styles, and you just keep working the picture until you've got something, and you follow your nose. It really is a very much an instinctive kind of way of working, but it has done me a real favour when it comes to my illustration work. So when I'm working for a client now, even with my children's book illustrations, it means that I will sometimes not have a clue what to do. So I'll have read the book, not really got much of an image in my head, although I do try and script all of my books that I illustrate first. So I script it, but then I will often come in and I will start with just by creating shapes and then working over the shapes until I get some sort of idea, and then following my nose and following instinctively. But I can teach people that, and I often do. Say, look, what would it look like? What does it need to have? And go from the large structures to the small ones. So you'll see here how this spaceship at the front slowly starts to build up. And it's worthwhile, if you're interested, going back a few stages to when I first dropped this in and seeing how working and knowing that where the lights and the shadows were, dropping the textures over the top from the tank, manipulating them around, putting in more textures, putting in bits, adding in highlights, scratches, all sorts of other things. In a minute you'll see some, I was quite pleased with the little rockets kind of thing that I got going as well, quite like those. Right, so what I was doing just here is I took the layer of black ink, scratches and edges and everything else, and I put it on a brand new layer. And then having put it on a brand new layer, I then locked the transparency and just ran over it lightly with a chalk white, which gave me some nice sharp edges very quickly for the piece on the edges of all those plate metals. As you see here, I was dropping layers down, and now I'm sort of like trying different saturations, and then again just coming back in. So you keep going in, changing saturations, coming back in again, doing more bits, changing colours, changing hues. So I put various different with this. You change hues on each individual level. So again, unlike Photoshop, it is destructive. So once you change the hues and the saturations and the colour layers of a layer, then you can't do anything about it. You can't just sort of like change it afterwards on the fly. So I took a copy of the base and then dropped a few different ones to new lines, new layers, and then went in and erased different layers so that I could produce different effects. At this point, really, I should have looked at my saturations and realised that I wasn't really creating enough depth, perspective depth, as it's called. So the idea is that the further away you are from the viewer, the distortion created by atmosphere, the atmospheric depth, sorry, not perspective depth, the atmosphere should create less more and more desaturation. So in other words, it tends to go grayer and it tends to go lighter. The mistake that a lot of people make is they make it go more blurry, and that's something that a camera will do, but not the human eye. Next time you're out and about, have a look into the distance at the horizon and you'll see that it's just as sharp in the horizon as it is near to. So it's definitely a camera effect. So because I'm a bit of a purist, I get a bit annoyed with things like that. I don't blur my backgrounds. I keep them all nice and sharp, just because I like traditional painting and I like it to right. You can blur it out, but I prefer not to on the way. So I was getting a bit frustrated with this rock. It kept looking good and then looking bad and then looking good again and looking bad. I think if I was just doing rocks, it'd have been alright, but I wasn't very happy with that middle ground rock, and to be honest, it was bad placement and everything else as well. Because I was doing a concept, I didn't spend enough time working out my shadows and things and compositionally. So compositionally, this picture is what I would call absolute pants. It is awful. That rock is right in the middle and oh dear. Yes, anyway, I could pick holes in it for hours. I really should probably redo it, but you know, I haven't got time with all the other commissioned work that I've got on at the same time. Still, worthwhile knowing. So I just want to talk a little bit about the how you create rockets and things like that. It's very simple, really. You just use an airbrush. So if you go in with a white or something like that first, or maybe an orange, and just pick up some pictures of fire from different places. If you pick up pictures of fire, then you'll soon see whereabouts flames should be added, and so forth and so on. Right, this is a bit of fun, dead easy to do. How do you turn a strange object into a space station? Well, you add lots of mass to it and you stick a little red dot on the end so that it's like it's got lights on it. Watch any Star Wars film and you'll see that's exactly how it's done every time. So I've got to say, I mean, if you look at this and you I don't know how big a screen you're looking at, but the acrylic brush combined with the blender brush is an absolute joy to work with. It's so much fun, simply because I like to be able to smoosh paint colours together nice and easily, and then if I want to do a really big blend, then I can go and pick up that blender brush on the side. So it is good fun. It is good stuff, is this. It's just like I said, fractal photo bashing and the way one would normally work with doing concept art and speed painting, it wasn't really having it. So I'm probably not going to be doing another speed paint, to be perfectly honest with you. You can see me going backwards and forwards, changing textures, changing the paper texture I'm working with. You know, in the end, that early rock wasn't too bad. So I'm just going in now and starting to add more details. Oh, and another thing at the back. So you can see how every time I start a new piece, I start with these black silhouettes, and it is so crucial. And I don't know why other illustration courses do not teach this. They go straight in saying, oh, just draw this. And yet, to be honest, we recognise things by their shape, which they create, their silhouette, and not by the outline that they have. So when you draw a black line around things, you know, when you're doing what one would call a normal drawing, and people start with that outline, and it's not a natural way for us to see pictures, to see objects in the real world. They are an imagination, a construct. So there's no wonder people struggle trying to understand how to draw things, because we're trying to teach them to draw things that aren't there. Anyway, that's beside the point. Right, so I was spending some time there. I've cut that a little bit out, but I was spending some time trying to find a decent rock. So I gave up with that middle image. Had to go for the speed version. So you go and find the texture of something that you wanted, and you simply just drop it all in over the top and erase the bit you don't want. So you put it in on a multiplier there. You can try different layers, but multiplier worked quite nicely with this one. And then I simply went in, and there was a tree there that was very annoying, so I had to paint that one out. So I just sampled sampled colours from around the rest of the image and coloured out. Always zoom out. On the right hand side there, you'll see that the navigator actually produces a very small window picture of what you're drawing anyway, so it always works quite nicely. But it's always worth zooming out so you can see how a picture is building. To be honest, I would probably produce a picture twice the size it needs to be and then halve it. So it's called drawing 2 up or illustrating 2 up. And it's a great technique, especially if you're using things like a blobby fountain pen, which I love working with blobby fountain pens. But when you reduce it, then it looks really nice. It's a technique we used to use back in the day when we used to use normal pens and pencils, far more than we do now. So we would illustrate a picture, and then you'd stick it on a photocopier, and you'd reduce it by half, and that would be the image that would go off to the printers. And it's actually, of all the places to learn it from, I learned it from watching, I think it was Blue Peter in the UK, and it was they'd gone to the Beano studios where they illustrate the Beano. Right, what am I doing here? This is the new layer, and it's all going on as black, and then change it to color dodge. And what you do is you pick up a nice spray paint, and you drop the opacity, and you drop the thing, you drop all sorts of things down, and you choose the ambient light that you're going to be using, and you go in and you paint on that color dodge layer, which the black doesn't show through, and it just makes everything go nice and bright, and you can just pick up extra highlights. Needed to drop that middle ground down a little bit. It was a bit too bright in comparison, so I was just using a spray splatter, and then I realised I had to match everything else around. I was beginning to be more and more annoyed by that jolly rock in the middle by this point, and thinking, why did I put the rock there? Very, very bad planning. I really should have spent at least 10 minutes on some compositional work first. But never mind. Can't say live and learn, it's the kind of stuff I teach. Why is it that when you forget it, never mind. Right, sign your pictures, very important. Okay, so we've got this far. We then drop it into Photoshop because there's no, oh, that's my family. Hi, family. It's just frustrating. So, right, so Photoshop, actually, I've got it set up so it's working in CMYK, which is why it wasn't very saturated. This is a little trick for adding texture. So you put in a black layer, change it to overlay, and then you put in some extra, add some noise to it, and then you can use that to create a change the saturations and all sorts of things. So great fun. Right, so this, I thought I'd zoom in and show you the picture which I created, but in actual fact you'll see it's slightly desaturated. So this was the one that I went back in Photoshop. I didn't record this bit unfortunately, but I went back into Photoshop and I cut out the foreground, middle ground, middle rear ground, middle background and the cloud layer, and I changed the saturations on the layers because it just didn't have enough depth perspective on it. So there we go, that's the whole picture. Don't go away yet, I've got some final thoughts coming up soon. Right, so in summary, what can I say? Well, in actual fact, the final image there, I did in the end give up. I wanted to desaturate the distance layers. I felt it was too saturated and I just couldn't manage to be bothered. I knew I could do it in Rebelle 3 and I wanted to try and stick with it, but finally I just gave up. I brought it into Photoshop and I changed some of those layers that you saw, but then in the final image I also went round and I created some extra masking layers and just got rid of the saturation so I could give it some proper layering as you went through. I also found it really frustrating as you watched it. You may have seen me trying to get that tank to fit into the right position and the tubes, and finally I ended up having to cut the tubes out and put them in and squeeze them around and then repaint over. Oh, it just wasn't the right thing. So for me, I'm afraid Rebelle 3, although I managed to create a piece in the end, wasn't super happy with it. I would have found it a lot easier in Photoshop. Maybe other people can do a better job of it, but my honest opinion is Rebelle 3, you're the best piece of software out there for me to be able to do my regular illustration work, which I use as pen and watercolor. But when it comes down to it, I'm afraid Photoshop is the way to go if you want to do speed painting and your composition work. So that's my view. If you want to stay in touch so you can hear about my about the illustration course that I'm putting together, then please do. I'd love to hear from you, and do check out the description. Okay, thank you very much. Take care.